Welcome to the world awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
Welcome back to the world awaits. This mini-series is brought to you by Avani Hotels and Resorts. With more than 40 properties across 5 continents, Avani offers city hotels, tropical resorts and retreats in nature. For more, visit avanihotels.com.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Kirsty, I am so excited because the full-length 19-minute documentary about my slow food travels in Greece and Bulgaria is now live. In case you hadn't forgotten, last year I traveled with Eurail with a videographer, a photographer and a producer, as well as Greek-Australian chef Ella Matas. And we went from Athens to Thessaloniki, Sofia and on to Plovdiv, just eating. So while we were doing all of that, Paolo, the videographer, has captured these golden fields and the olive groves, these vineyards that we visited at the foot of the Greek gods, the cities of 7 hills, and the village station masters in their big hats waving us on through these tiny little crossroads. And all those glorious tables of food prepared with care and tradition and respect for the environment on which this produce has been created. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes and you can find it on my socials. So that has been the absolute highlight of my week. And I also, because you can't keep a good woman down, I did kick up my heels at the launch of Melbourne's newest 5-star hotel, the Hyde Melbourne Place, which is on Russell Street in the Grid. And it's got it all. It's got a super stylish rooftop bar mid-air up the top. It's got a moody basement bar, Mr. Mills, down the bottom, and also a destination restaurant, Marmello, around the back, because Melbourne loves nothing more than getting down a dark alleyway to find something fabulous, don't you think? Yeah, it's been a big week for me. What about yours, Kirsty?
While you were eating and drinking your way around the place all over the world and back here in Melbourne, I was getting some vaccination. So we took the family off to get some vaccinations for Cambodia. I asked a few people about their views on this. It seems people are really divided about whether or not to get them or not before they go. Do you vax before you go, Belle?
Look, if I'm going somewhere that I think might need a flu vax, I'm going to do that. So going to Vienna in the middle of winter and stuff like that, where everybody's just snotty, because you don't want to get knocked out and miss your holidays, do you? And I'm usually up to date with my tetanus, but I guess the last time I had a big vax was for Kenya for yellow fever, because they used to check your card before you came in, and I had heard people not being accepted in. What did you get done for Cambodia?
Actually, we got quite a few done when the kids were a bit younger before COVID, when we went to Vietnam, just because the kids were little and I wanted to make sure we were just completely up to date, because we were going out into some regional areas and cycling around. But it cost us like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, close to 1,000 from memory, for the 4 of us. But I know it's ridiculous. But this time I just wanted to make sure we were up to date. We just had the basics because we'd already had Hep A and Hep B, which are once in a lifetime type vaccines. And typhoid lasts about 3 years. We just got that in a flu shot. And yeah, we got them done in a bulk build travel vaccination clinic, and they were just so good. They used a website called Travax, which I tried to look up because I thought that'd be a cool one to keep up your sleeve. But it's funded by the Scottish government and it's just provided to those in the medical industry. But anyway, what you can do is you can go to Smart Traveller and just type in the country, and it'll tell you under the health risk tab. When you type in the country first, obviously, it'll tell you all the possible things you can get. So it can be a bit overwhelming. But yeah, look, the best thing to do is, if you are in doubt, is just to go see the doctor. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to if you're just prepared to risk it or not, and where you're going. If you're going out in jungles or farms or somewhere, then ideally get everything. But if you're in a resort, I guess it's a bit debatable.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to areas off the beaten track where you need those vaccinations and you can't afford them, then, do you reevaluate where you choose to go? And talking about destinations off the beaten track, travel insurance company Insure and Go has come out with some new research showing 10 places it says Australians should put on the travel list before they become too overcrowded. I don't know how many of these are going to need vaccinations. Let's run through them.
Yeah. They say this travel insurance company, Insure and Go research says that as travel continues to grow and more flight routes are added, it's analysed some emerging trends and found some underrated places. It says that we should book now before they come the next hotspot, like Japan is at the moment. It says that the expansion of the Qantas network with 220,000 more seats added this year, my God, is fueling ease of travel and to these new travel hotspots. And so top of its list is actually Lombok in Indonesia. And it says you should forget Bali. I doubt that's ever going to happen with Australians. And it says it's the perfect antidote for anyone who's tired of those regions that are all bintang and white singlet.
I do Lombok, but it's been pitched as a new Bali for decades, and it still hasn't happened. That's not a bad thing, just keeping it quiet. Second on that list was Kuching in the Malaysian state of Sarawak, which is on the island of Borneo. So here you can find orangutans in their natural habitat, not to mention the world's best laksa, which Anthony Bourdain declared breakfast of the gods. And I have gone to that restaurant that he ate it at, very simple one. And I think he was on the money. Ensuring Go points to the more than 117 flights per week to Kuala Lumpur from Sydney alone, with frequent connections onto Kuching. So I was there writing for Gourmet Traveller a few years ago, and you had to connect through KL. There are no direct flights with Australia, but as it says, there are so many flights between Australia and Malaysia.
Yeah, that's a lot to come on board in 2 years then, isn't it? Next up is Ladakh, which is a large area of the northern and eastern Kashmir region of India, and it's dubbed the land of high passes. And this Himalayan region has all the culture and colour you want in India. And they say it's just a great alternative to Nepal's tourist-heavy trails.
I still haven't been to Ladakh, but it is my dream. In fifth place is Salalah in southern Oman. This is a really interesting inclusion because it's not like Oman is top of the must-visit peaks. In fact, people love it. People that do go there love it because it's so sleepy when you compare it to, its neighbors like Dubai or Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. But Salalah has a cooler climate and a green season as well. It rains a little bit, creating a seaside oasis in the Arabian Peninsula. And it's got these spectacular beaches, and the souqs are filled with frankincense because it's one of the world's first producers. And the survey says that Oman is investing in Salalah to transform it into a hotspot reached by Doha and Dubai.
And this was Sri Lanka. Gosh, I remember before COVID, Sri Lanka was just such a hotspot. It was like more than Japan was at the moment. But the tourism was hit really hard there because there were all those nationwide protests in 2022, and that sparked, they were protesting because of widespread power outages, and there was a shortage of things like fuel. So that caused the president to flee the country. But things have actually settled down now, and there's a lot to love about Sri Lanka, and they do really need the tourists to return. It's such a remarkable place. So when we were there in 2018, we stayed at Anantara Peacehaven Tangal, and it has to be one of the most beautiful resort hotels I've ever stayed at. My God, it's just spectacular. It's near the old fort town of Tangal, and it has these, when you walk in, it has these giant doors open, and you just gaze out across these infinity pools overlooking this ocean with these swaying palm trees, and all the villas are nestled in tropical gardens with private pools, and it's just perfect for those who love food or wellness because it's got an incredible spa, and the food was just to die for. And one of the things the report points to is the incredible wildlife in Sri Lanka. And when we were there, we visited Ujawalawa National Park Safari, which is one of the best places in Sri Lanka to see wild Asian elephants. And it's more than 30,800 hectares at this nature reserve. And you wander around there and there's elephants everywhere, which we saw when we were there too. And they often roam in herds of up to 100. We didn't see that, but we did see them roaming in small herds. And this research also references the Pico Trail, which is Sri Lanka's first long-distance hiking route. And we actually interviewed the man who created it, Miguel Cunit, on episode 77, if you want to head back and take a listen.
Yeah, Sri Lanka is a funny one, isn't it? It waxes and wanes. I dragged my 2-year-old baby around for work years ago, and it was incredible. And then it dies off, and then it comes back again. So it's always worse on being on the radar. In 6th and 7th places, Bohol in the Philippines and Azores in Portugal. So Bohol is the home of those iconic chocolate hills, which are geographical formations. There's more than 1,000 of these cone-shaped hills. And Panglao Island, the insurer says that routes to Manila now make it easier for Australians to access. And you are seeing a lot more flights going up into the Philippines as well as within the hills themselves. And Azores is an archipelago of 9 volcanic islands in the Macaronesia region. And this is being seen as the next Majorca, which is fast growing for travellers looking for unspoilt beauty and ecotourism.
Yeah, and 8th and 9th were Albania in southern Europe, and Jeju Island in South Korea. So the insurer says Albania appeals because of its amazing beaches along the Albanian Riviera and ancient UNESCO sites, but it doesn't have the price tag of other European cities or the crowds. Although it did apparently have a 15% hike in foreign and overseas travellers in 2024, so it might not be under the radar for too long. And also, Jeju's also seen as the Hawaii of South Korea. So I don't know about that one. That's probably long been known as being pretty popular for honeymooners. And because it's home to all these amazing beaches and coastal trails, and also for kids, the area's largest water park. And the insurer says it's becoming increasingly accessible because of new direct flights from major Asian hubs and also growing in the areas of wellness and adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. I debate that Jeju one as well, because when you look at all of those busiest routes in the world, in Sydney to Melbourne is one of them. The flights down to Jeju Island from Seoul are on that top list as well, because this is within the country, because every honeymooner in Korea seems to go there. They do have lots of museums dedicated to sex and health and things like that. Like, it's very tailored toward that particular clientele. But I've got to agree with Albania taking off. The hiking is superb, and Scandinavians and Germans have already discovered that the beaches are exactly the same as the Greek beaches, because they're separated just by a border, but it really is a fraction of the price. And the last on this list is Kyrgyzstan. It says that Kyrgyzstan's Tian Shan Mountains, the Alpine lakes, and the yurt stay experiences transport travelers to a world of rugged adventure and nomadic heritage. And I have to say, we're seeing a lot more of Central Asia just in the travel sphere anyway. But with Turkish Airlines' new Sydney-Istanbul flights, it makes it a lot easier for Australians to get closer to the capital of Bishkek. And we're going to put a link to the Insure and Go research in the show notes for your next travel planning session.
This week, I'm putting my co-host Belle Jackson in the hot seat. Belle recently went to Tunisia and tells us about what this underrated North African country has to offer and why it should be on your travel to-do list for those who love culture, colour and deserts. Welcome to the show, Belle.
Hi.
Oh, nice to have you on The World Awaits.
I know, I've never done this before. I'm a bit nervous.
So let's start by telling us where it is.
Tunisia, North Africa. So if you look across the top of the continent, you've got Morocco on one side, you've got Egypt on the other, and you've got Tunisia in the middle. You can say Tunisia, Tunisia, there's so many pronunciations. The thing about it is that it is the smallest country along that top. It's got Libya on one side, Algeria on the other. Neither of them known as particularly tourist friendly at the moment, but that may well change. Let's move it in a second. But in the middle, Tunisia's been a bit of an outlier in that sense, because it's the southern Mediterranean. So you've got gorgeous beaches that Northern Europeans flock down to for a cheap beach holiday. If I was going to say, is it completely hidden? I would say no for North Europeans. I would say Australia, it really hasn't hit the radar. But its neighbours include Malta, about an hour away, and your favourite island in the Mediterranean.
Oh no, Sardinia. I was going to say that.
1 hour away. Like, it's just amazing. So it really is the stepping stone across into Italy. So there you go.
Yeah. So how do you get there? And do you have to have a visa? What hoops do you have to jump to get there from Australia?
I flew with Qatar Airways, so I came up through Doha and had just a couple of hours connection in Doha, and then straight across to Tunis on a regional flight. But if you were already in Europe, I would suggest, if you were doing an Italian holiday or something, you can just jump on a flight down from there. It's actually quite surprisingly well connected. So it feels like you go, oh, it's in the middle of North Africa, and you're like, when am I going to go there? But it is part of the Mediterranean country. So it is much more accessible. And no, you stamp your passport on arrival, and there's no need for a pre-application for visas or anything like that.
And is that the appeal, because it's got that Mediterranean coastline, but also the deserts and mountains?
If you look, I don't think Australians need to travel for great beaches, do we? So I would not say that's the appeal for Australians. For me, the appeal was the desert. Although when you look at the waters of it, it is just magnificent. But really, for me, it's a country that's going to be sliced in three. So you've got the Mediterranean, you've got the mountains and plains, and then when you go in the south, you are touching the edge of the Sahara. And I find that just so romantic because the way people live is so different to when you're on a beach and you're sitting under an umbrella and you're doing that kind of thing. The desert is a whole different world, and that for me is the lure of it.
Yeah, amazing. And you were telling me that there were quite a few films that were shot there too. Where were they shot and what were they?
This is going to give you a bit of an insight as to what you're looking for. So probably I think the biggest one is Star Wars. The original Star Wars was shot there back in 96. This is, 76. It was shot there and released 77. So we're talking a long time ago. So if you remember, Luke was living on a desert planet called Tatooine. It's named after a town and a region called Tatooine. So when George Lucas went there, he was so inspired by this region, he just basically lifted the names because he's, Tatooine, that sounds like a great name for a desert planet. And let's think it's populated by smugglers. There is a lot of smuggling around there, mostly coming across from Libya. And also when you go back, everybody's walking around in those dark hooded cloaks. They're actually the burnos is worn by Tunisians. So he really took a lot from that. And that gives us some clues of what you're looking for there. But I wouldn't say Star Wars is the only one because The English Patient, which I read while I was there, it's absolutely divine and it's set in North Africa. That was shot there with Ralph Fiennes in these incredible salt plains and desert landscapes. Also, Raiders of the Lost Ark, I've got to say there was a point in this trip when we were running through these tangled streets of the ancient Kairouan, which is one of the cities in Tunisia. And then the guide goes, oh, this is the place where Harrison Ford did blah, blah, blah. And then we all had to reenact having a fist fight and running away. And there's people chasing themselves through the street, pretending to be on the set of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But the one I did not know was Life of Brian was shot here. So the Monty Python classic was shot here in the 60s. And I know, it was so bizarre. It shows, I think the government's really interesting in the sense that that was a really racy film. And it was banned in places like Ireland when it first came out because it's making jokes of a guy called Brian, who everybody thinks is the Messiah. So when his mum is hanging out the window going, he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy. They filmed all of that in these cave and clay cities that still exist in the south of Tunisia now, and also the rounded cities of the spaceport of Mos Espa. So when George Lucas went there and he built these film sets, the government said, you can build the film sets in the middle of the desert, but when you leave, you have to leave them there. Of course, the movie went on to become a hit. There's been 5 Star Wars films now shot in Tunisia. And so people still go back there and they go to Mos Espa and they play around with lightsabers. We may have done that. You can dress up, you can jump on a camel and roar around the place and just visit all of these incredible locations. And it's a constant source of income for the country because it's Star Wars is such a cult experience for so many people. So
yes. Set jetting anywhere is at the moment just taking off, isn't it? So once you've done your running around the desert with your saber light sword or whatever you've got, what do you do when you're there? What else are you doing? And what sort of food are you eating? What is there to do? If I was going to go and I just had my couple of days in the desert and I saw these film locations, what am I doing then?
Look, I have to say that the accommodation is one of the most interesting things that when you're staying there, because when you get right down the south into the Sahara, people traditionally lived in a couple of ways. They either dug cave houses into the sides of the mountains, and they often had fortresses there too, where they were storing their food and granaries and stuff. A lot of them are being turned into, not a lot, a few of them have been turned into hotels now. So you get to stay in these cave hotels. And the other way that they would build their houses, considering there's no trees and stuff around there to be making timber houses, is that they would dig down so that it's just incredible. So you've got these houses dug down into the earth. So you're walking along, then you see this massive hole, and then down there is a house that's been excavated into the earth. So it meant that you were hidden from marauding tribes, because at this time there was a lot of action going across from the Bedouin and the Berber tribes coming from the North Africa, so from the Moroccan side, and then from the Arab invasion from the Middle East. So it was a real crossroads of activity. And so people would just sink themselves into the ground. And you can go and stay in these places. And we we had lunch in one of them. Like, it was a house that this family still maintains. And so we turned up and walked into this underground cave and had lunch. And it was just incredible. I thought, yeah, those experiences of seeing how people live and the fact that they're turning them into tourism experiences now, but they're not making them too shishy. So literally dugout caves. So your bed and your furniture are dug into the mountains, which I mean, for me is great, because then when you're there, then we did quite a few half-day hikes as well. And you're climbing up over the mountain plateaus and down through these mountain passes, and you're seeing springs rushing past with fresh water. And you might find a mosque dedicated to a Muslim saint that's been there for 600 years or something like that. It's really quite astonishing in that sense. The hiking really had a historical bent to it, which I really enjoyed.
Amazing. And what about the cities and the towns?
Tunis is the biggie. That is the capital that you fly into. And the noticeable part of that town, it really gives you an idea too, that these cities were built at a time of turmoil. So when they built the medinas, the original old part of the city. You were designed to get lost in them. So if you were coming in with your army, you couldn't just ride up to the palace sitting at the top and take it over. The street, and you'll find this in a lot of Arabian style cities, is that they've got dead ends and alleyways. They've got narrow little laneways, so you can't ride with 3 horses across and take out everybody. So they were designed to bamboozle and confuse. So when you go into those cities, of course, you've got the modern city around the side of it, but inside you've got this knot of laneways and hidden spaces. So it's like peak Melbourne is maybe how I would put it, because we do love a good laneway. And from there, that's where you'll find some of the more interesting accommodation as well, because they do love a good tile. If you are a tile freak, like I am a tile freak, and you thought that you had to go to Portugal, you could go to Tunisia, because it lends a lot of, I think Morocco is its natural comparison in that sense. And it's just this incredible sense of design. You go into the medinas, and that's where you'll find your accommodation for the night, even at hostels just covered in gorgeous tiles. Or I also visited some of the high-end places in Tunis just to have a look at this gorgeous, cool, atmospheric, tiny boutique hotels that have been hidden into the medinas. So they're just fascinating to go around. And that's why you've had so many things filmed in there, such as Raiders of the Lost Ark, because, yeah, they're so beautiful.
And so is it easy to get around?
When I was with my guide and I traveled with Intrepid, it was easy. And then when I'd step out on my own and be like, oh my Lord, so you really did have to live on your GPS when you were right in the deep of the Medinas. But there was always somebody to say, are you lost by any chance? Do you want me to lead you out? And you go, yes, because I have no idea where I am. But for me, that is really part of the fun, the whole thing, because there's always, eventually you're going to come across a cafe or a hotel or just somebody saying, you look like a fundamentally lost woman. And I'd be like, yes, here I am. Yeah, so you can get around to them. But some of these are 9th century cities. They're not going to be designed the same as we are, with the big open boulevards where we don't have to worry about invaders, where you don't have to worry about food shortage and stuff like that. I think they have grown organically to evolve with their political environment. Because remember, this is a really ancient city. At the top of Tunis, you've got Carthage, which is where Hannibal, the warlord, come from, the warlord that took on Rome at the time of the Punic Wars. Remember, he led his war elephants across and tried to conquer Rome and things like that. So while you've got all of these medinas, you've also got a lot of Roman amphitheaters that are just dissolving it slowly into the environment as well. That's another major reason that people might go there. They're seeing these World Heritage listed Roman ruins. And if you think of the Colosseum in Rome, insane, right? Here, you might be you and another 30 people just wandering around them. And it's so incredibly atmospheric.
Is that what surprised you most about it?
I think so, because I wasn't staying in the Mediterranean resorts as well. There's a lot of them. There are areas that you'll find they've got the low-cost carriers coming in from Northern Europe, and they're going in there for the fly and flop. I always mix it up. But we were staying away from that. So when you suddenly did see a coachload of a package tour, you'd be quite surprised, because you don't see them in most of those heritage sites around the country. It's remarkably free of the hustle and the crowds. It's fantastic.
It's really good to get an insight into your little visits to these very unique, certainly not overcrowded destinations that you continue to go to, Belle. And if you want to see some of Belle's images of her visit and read and listen to more of her stories she's writing and talking about, including for the Sydney Morning Herald and ABC Radio Adelaide about this remarkable destination, go to her Insta page, which is global_salsa. And you can see more about Intrepid Travel's Tunisia experience at intrepidtravel.com/au.
This mini-series is brought to you by Avani Hotels and Resorts. Avani has multiple properties across Italy, including in Venice and Milan. And we're going to discuss some of the exclusive experiences you can have to immerse yourself in local culture when you stay with Avani. Find out more at avanihotels.com.
Our tip this week is how you can get a good dose of culture when you travel to Italy. So Avani Hotels has come up with a series of immersive experiences where you can do everything from meeting Hollywood mask maker Augusto on the island of Giudecca to making your own glass beads in Murano or heading out on a Fiat 500 tour with a local guide in Milan. I was in Italy last year and have to say we were traveling with the teams, so we didn't do any specific experiences like this. But gosh, it's a good way to get to not only meet the locals, but learn about the traditional artisan crafts, which I just love doing when I go away. And sadly, a lot of them are often lost to future generations. So it's great to experience things like that.
Yeah, look, I was child-free when I was last in Venice and did visit the island of Giudecca, but I love the idea of making your own mask. Of course, masks that are an intrinsic part of Carnevale, which is held each February. On this experience with Avani Rio Novo Hotel, you'll visit an artisan workshop hidden within one of Venice's most secret gardens. And under the expert guidance of Augusto, become a mask maker for the day. You don't have to be an artist to become one, and you're creating your own souvenir. And during the workshop, Augusto also shares some of the city's secrets and the stories behind some of the most celebrated Venetian masks.
Yeah. Glassmaking's another craft that Italy's renowned for because of its centuries-old tradition and the high quality of the glassmaking. And if you stay at Avani Hotels Rio Novo, again, you can visit an art studio near the Glass Museum where you can see contemporary art and glass production. And you can also watch the local glassmakers at work. God, it's amazing. When you watch glassmakers at work, gosh, it makes you realize what an absolute craft it is. And on this one, they use lamp working technique to create artworks. And then you can also put your creativity to the test and make your own small glass artwork. And then you have a memento to take home.
So gorgeous. But I do love this next experience, possibly even more, which is a running tour of the city at sunrise before it's awash with visitors. So you take a guide from the hotel who runs beside you, and you can see the main attractions and promenades of Venice without the crowds. So I would suggest running a little bit faster in between so you've got some time to take a few snaps while you catch your breath.
Also at Avani Rio Novo Venice Hotel, you can visit Luna delle Venezia Atelier, who are masters in woodworking for bespoke architectural and interior projects. And this experience is where you can also get an explanation of the history behind Bricola, which is the Venetian lagoon symbol made of oak wood used to guide the boats through the city. I love this. So guests can get the chance to refine that while converting it into a more sort of functional and stylish multi-use design piece.
And the last Venetian experience we're going to mention is the one closest to my stomach, and that is a cooking class. And that's because Venice is the birthplace of Italian classics, including tiramisu and the very dainty tramezzini, which are perfect tea sandwiches. And Venice did oversee the evolution of the spritz, originally made with white wine and soda. It took Venice to add the bitters to create the spritz that we drink today. So the cooking class at Avani Rio Novo Venice Hotel takes you on a deep dive into Venetian cuisine.
Heading to Milan and the Avani Palazzo Moscova, this experience is one that's going to fill your Insta feed, and that's a Fiat 500 vintage tour through Milan. Oh my God, I'd love to do this. So you go with Federico and you take a seat in his meticulously restored vintage Fiat 500, and he takes you on a tour and reveals personal tales and anecdotes along the way. And you get to dive into Milan's design district and wind around the streets of the historic centre.
Gorgeous. I do think that of all the cities, you need a guide for Milan. Its best experiences are definitely hidden in the many city courtyards. One of those great experiences is creating personalized cosmetics, because Milan, of course, is famous for cosmetic production. So in this experience, you can create a bespoke lipstick or specialized skincare on a 40-minute experience at the City Lab Cosmetics, which I think is just brilliant.
And what's Italy without a shopping spree? In Milan, you can find the city's hidden vintage fashion gems, from prestigious fashion houses like Valentino and Chanel to local boutiques and stores, meeting some of the locals behind the local labels along the way. And for more information, visit avaniHotels.com, and we'll put a link in the show notes. If you'd like to help support our production costs, you can buy us a coffee at coffee.com/theworldawaits. That's ko-fi.com/theworldawaits, so we can continue to bring you inspirational travel interviews with the world's best.
My guest next week takes us on safari in South Africa and the Kruger National Park. If you haven't heard of him, Australian author Tony Park is one to put on the bedside reading list. He now lives just on the fringe of Kruger and has more than 21 novels under his belt, all set in Southern Africa. This is an interview not to be missed.
Wow, can't wait to hear from Tony Park, and I will put him on my bedside. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Click on our profile, scroll down to the bottom to ratings and reviews. And if you're on Spotify, go to our main page, click the 3 dots under our photo. We really appreciate a rating and review because it helps us in the ratings. Or simply drop us a line at hello@theworldawaits.au. We love nothing more than hearing from our listeners.
That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.